Today, it's the song that drove one of the UK's biggest bands kicking and screaming out of obscurity. Thematically, it was completely out of character for this lead singer. It was an unexpected bright spot on an album that kind of makes you feel like you might never see daylight again. I mean, don't get me wrong, this LP is one of the most darkly beautiful records ever created. It's a moody, melancholy masterpiece that's not only been hailed as the peak of this band's career, but also one of the greatest albums of the 80s. So what was this so-called happy track even doing on this album? Could this band's reluctant rock star make peace with the song that turned this indie band into stadium headliners? Let's find out. It's a great story coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Truly, this one's a good one. You know, if you ever drew the logos of your favorite bands on your Trapper Keeper or your school folders, you're going to understand this channel perfectly. Nostalgia Central. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the bell so you never miss out. The stories from the legends. We also have a Patreon. Check that out for full interviews, exclusive content that helps us keep it a daily channel. So it's time for another edition of Number One in Our Hearts. This is the show that honors songs that were so incredibly great. They absolutely should have been number one on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. But for whatever reason, be it radio play or lack of marketing, label support, or just craziness, the song came up short. Previous episodes, we've covered Sowing the Seeds of Love by Tears for Fears and Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers. But today we're getting into the story of a song that fell one spot short of number one, but it definitely deserved that top spot. I remember trying to use the force to will it to number one. Do any of you guys remember that scene from Empire Strikes Back where, Luke is holding out his hand to pull the lightsaber from the ice? He's hanging off that thing. Then he finally did it. I must have tried that dozens of times growing up. I wanted this to go to number one so bad, but it had to settle for number two. If you haven't figured it out by now, we're talking about Lovesong from The Cure's magnum opus, Disintegration. It came in at number two on the Hot 100. Now, between 1978 and 1988, The Cure released 20 singles around the world. 21 if you count the re-release of Boys Don't Cry in '86. But during that time, the band had received little fanfare in the US. And you know what? That was fine with lead singer Robert Smith, who was happy living underground. That's where he lived. Only 6 of those singles would actually chart in the US. Well, sort of. Let's Go to Bed and the Love Cats were both bubbling under the Hot 100. They went to number 109 and number 107 to be exact. But on average, these 6 singles turned in a number 82 ranking. Like I said, nowhere near the mainstream. But their first Hot 100 breakthrough was the number 99 hit In Between Days. Happened in '86. And the following year, The Cure had their first top 40 hit with Just Like Heaven. It came in at exactly number 40. It's pretty ridiculous for one of the catchiest songs, one of the most perfect tunes of the 80s. But even though Just Like Heaven barely reached the top 40, it did spend an impressive 19 weeks on the chart overall, longer than many other higher charting singles at that time. In addition, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me climbed to number 35 on the Billboard's album chart. Not overwhelmingly popular, but it was 24 spots better than their previous offering, 1985's A Head on the Door, for those keeping track. Back on their home turf in the UK, though, The Cure were a lot further ahead in the game. They had 14 charting singles, averaging a number 28 spot, and even had a number 7 hit with the Love Cats. 100 spots better than that particular song did in the US. So by the late 80s, it was clear that The Cure were moving away from the margins and really closing in on mainstream respectability. It was a thought that really horrified Robert Smith. The last thing he wanted was to become a one-dimensional pop band. To make things worse, the rest of the band seemed to be happy about their newfound popularity. The opposite. Robert Smith's response was, pull back on the reins and rewind to an earlier era. The darkness and foreboding of 1982's pornography. Said Robert Smith, after the Kiss Me album, we got our first real taste of big-time success in America. My reaction to it was to make Disintegration, which was at the time considered to be commercial suicide. End of quote. Disintegration, by the way, is considered the second installment in a trilogy that began with Pornography and ended with Blood Flowers. It came out in 2000. Most Cure fans would know that. Someday, yeah, maybe. Disintegration was spawned from a period of deep personal despair and uncertainty for Robert Smith. Not only over increasing tension of going mainstream, but for several other reasons as well. In addition to Robert's concern over popularity, other phobias were starting to set in. Smith began work on the album in the immediate aftermath of his 29th birthday on April 21st, 1988. He had a deathly fear of getting older, and he worried that his best songwriting years were behind him. This next album, he thought, was his last chance to produce something meaningful and really monumental. In fact, for a time, he even considered making Disintegration a solo project. That is, if his bandmates weren't sufficiently excited about the material. And he'd already written a substantial part of the album before he even showed it to the band. It turns out, however, that the rest of the band, like the rest of us, were very excited about what they heard. So the group demoed the album at drummer Boris Williams' West Country home in the summer of 1988, before relocating to Hook End Manor Studio. There, with the help of producer David M. Allen, The Cure recorded Disintegration from November until February the following year. And the result was fantastic. Disintegration, it's gloomy and melancholy, but at the same time, lush and as gorgeous as music gets. It's the ultimate ethereal mood piece. No doubt thanks in part to Smith's renewed interest in hallucinogenics. But listening to Disintegration, it's a supernatural experience. And in every respect, Smith had accomplished what he had set out to do. Disintegration became a standard for the ages. And Robert Smith knew it. As I talked about this some months ago when we covered Pictures of You, while the band was recording at Hook End Manor, an electric heater short-circuited and caught the house on fire. Robert Smith, I guess, had brought many of his worldly possessions with him, but he prioritized one thing in this blaze: his lyrics. Said Robert Smith, "We saved my lyrics crawling along the floor with wet towels around our heads. We made a chain and held hands, and because I was the only one who knew where they were, I was the last in the chain. We got told off by the firemen. They were saying, 'Your life is more important than your words.' And I was like, 'What do you know?' They were the only thing that was irreplaceable, I thought." End of quote. Whenever I'm alone with you. So cool that he saved his lyrics. I want to break for a second to mention our sponsor, Bubs Naturals. You know, as we age, we need to pay more attention to what we put in our body to recapture the vitality and energy of our youth. Sounds like you have to completely adjust your lifestyle, but with Bubs Naturals, you don't have to do that at all. Bubs Naturals makes it possible for you to live a healthier, more exciting, and adventurous life and actually exceed your expectations just by adding some powder to a meal or beverage. Starts with Bubs Naturals collagen and MCT oil powder that is backed by scientific research and discovery. Bubs Naturals is for anyone pursuing the proverbial fountain of youth, especially those of us over 40 that don't want to lose even one step from their youth. That's why Navy SEALs and some of the most accomplished professional athletes subscribe to Bubs Naturals. Make sure to click on the special Professor of Rock link below to get 20% off nature's highest quality and sustainably sourced products that will give you the fuel to reach your maximum potential. Okay, so later when Robert Smith presented the album to the label, they balked at it. In Robert Smith's words, he said, "I thought it was our masterpiece. They thought it was shit." That's what he said, end of quote. Despite the pushback from unbelievers, though, Robert Smith held true to his vision for Disintegration from start to finish. The album was released on May 2nd, 1989, less than 2 weeks after his 30th birthday. It encompassed 12 tracks, all of them worthy of a closer look. And I think we'll do that. So far, we've covered a couple of them, the singles Pictures of You and Lullaby. Two other singles were issued from the album, though, Fascination Street, which just missed the top 40. I believe it went to number 46. And of course, today's featured track, the number 2 hit, Lovesong. Taking a cross-section of Disintegration, you're obviously going to find a lot of dark themes. Despair, loss, night terrors, hungry spiders, broken relationships, drowning, aging, isolation, and death. Every track is haunting, every track except for maybe one, Lovesong. The album's fourth song feels like, I'm not going to say out of place because I think it fits sonically, but rather it feels a bit like a thematic deviation. Lovesong has a noticeably different feel from the rest of the album. It's just as the title says, a blatant love song. And for Robert Smith, this was a first. I mean, he'd approached the subject before, but this was the first time that he went all in. Said Smith, "It's an open show of emotion. It's not trying to be clever. It's taken me 10 years to reach the point where I felt comfortable singing a very straightforward love song. In the past, I've always felt a last-minute need to disguise the sentiment." End of quote. Lyrically, it is simplistic, and yes, I hate to say it, not very original, but just take a moment and consider who we're talking about here. This is Robert Smith. And what might feel pedestrian for any other artist is practically unexplored territory for The Cure. And that in itself makes it novel. It's completely unexpected. It's a truly breathtaking piece of songcraft. I mean, Smith has actually called it a key track on Disintegration, a song that makes people think twice. He said, if it hadn't been on Disintegration, it would have been very easy to dismiss the record as having a certain mood. But throwing Lovesong in there sort of upsets people because they think that doesn't fit. That's what he said. But I think if you look at Lovesong as purely a romantic overture, you might be missing something. I mean, you really have to approach this song from within the context of the rest of the album to fully appreciate it. So since The Cure used a cave as the backdrop for this song's music video, I'm going to run with that idea kind of as a metaphor. So think of Disintegration as a deep cave. It's filled with all this dark, subterranean beauty. But without a lamp or a flashlight, you can't fully recognize what actually is there. Lovesong is like the light you bring in as you venture further underground. It helps illuminate everything else around you. Casts light and creates contrast so that you can appreciate your surroundings. It acted in that way to bring new fans to the album because it was such a hit. It was many people's first introduction to The Cure and to the album. That being said, Lovesong is still miles and miles away from the rest of the romantic bubblegum pop that was playing on mainstream radio at this very moment. I mean, by comparison, Lovesong is brooding and atmospheric. You take, for example, a few top 10 offerings the very same week that Lovesong reached number 2. I mean, at number 10, you had When I Looked at Him by Expose. Number 6, Cover Girl by New Kids on the Block. Again, number 4, Listen to Your Heart by Roxette. I love Roxette, and I appreciate all types of music. I'm just saying, for comparison's sake, it's an interesting contrast. And then there's also Janet Jackson with Miss You Much, the Billboard #1 hit that kept Lovesong out of the top spot. Again, a fan of Janet, but it's just different. I mean, after listening to everything else surrounding Lovesong on the charts, you can't tell me that it doesn't fit on Disintegration. However, I should point out that its presence on the album is minimal. And the tracks on Disintegration, not including Lovesong, average about 6 minutes and 15 seconds per song. The longest of those is The Same Deep Water as You. Classic. It comes in over 9 minutes. And Lovesong clocks in at just under 3.5 minutes, making it the shortest track, really a true pop single running time. I mean, make of that what you will. But said Robert Smith, some of our songs go on because they're exploring the mood. You need a certain amount of time to express that. You just can't say, this is sadness, and then play one note. Lovesong obviously was something completely different, though. The reason for that is because the track was actually a wedding present for Robert's fiancée, Mary Poole. Reportedly, he couldn't think of anything else to give her, so he wrote what he called a cheap and cheerful song. Robert Smith jested that she probably would have preferred diamonds, but at least she could look back and be glad that he gave her this song. Robert Smith was undoubtedly underselling the effect that Lovesong had on Mary, because on another occasion he said that she was very pleased when he gave her a tape of the song. I guess after receiving it, she went away to another room just to listen to it alone. When she came back, she just smothered him with kisses. I guess you could say she liked it. By that point in their relationship, though, the couple had been together for 15 years. The two had first met as teenagers in drama class. Smith called her the nicest girl in school and admitted that he went out with her because pretty much everyone else wanted to. But it turned out to be a perfect match. And from the start, Mary was that unusual soul who could be just what Robert needed, and he adored her for it. Robert Smith would later say in 1996, "Mary means so incomprehensibly much to me. I actually don't think she has ever realized how dependent I've been on her during all these years we've been together. She's always been the one that has saved me when I've been the most self-destructive. She's always been the one that has caught me when I have been so very close to falling apart completely. And if she would have disappeared, I'm sorry. I know that I'm falling into my irritating, miserable image by saying, I would have killed myself." That's powerful. So Robert Smith and Mary Poole were married in Worth Abbey on August 13th of 1988, with much of the band there for the celebration. Actually, bassist Simon Gallup was Smith's best man. And Robert Smith fittingly played DJ for much of the night. Now, summing up the event, Smith admitted that they just got married so they could have a nice day. So Mary could walk down an aisle in a white dress in front of all their family. But he also admitted, "It's really dumb, but I was sort of overcome." Now, earlier I mentioned the music video for Lovesong, so I guess Robert Smith was wholeheartedly disappointed with it. The clip features Robert and company playing their instruments in what was supposed to have been a fairy cave. He said that he wanted it to feel like they were playing in this expansive chamber that went on forever and ever. However, according to Robert Smith, it looked very cramped in post. And as for that lingering opening shot, well, let's just say that Robert thought it looked like something other than a stalagmite. Also, Mary is missing from this video, which maybe doesn't seem like a big deal, except that, she made such a memorable cameo dancing with Robert in the video for 1987's Just Like Heaven. I thought it was time for an encore there. Well, almost from the start, the members of The Cure knew that they had their biggest US hit. Lovesong entered the charts at number 58, and it became their second top 40 single 2 weeks later. In its 11th week, it became The Cure's biggest hit of all time, claiming number 2 on both the Hot 100 and the Modern Rock charts. In 2004, Smith lamented, "I have to admit that I was actually a bit upset that it stopped at number 2. I never got to see what I would have really done with a number 1 single." Believe me, Robert, we were just as upset. Internationally, Lovesong made less of a splash. It reached number 21 in West Germany, went to number 18 in the UK, and went top 10 in Canada. Coincidentally, while The Cure's Lovesong was peaking, another song called Lovesong by Tesla was making its way up the pop charts. It topped out at number 10 on the Hot 100. Through the years, Lovesong has made a handful of media placements. There's The Vampire Diaries, Reunion, Atypical Hindsight, I Could Never Be Your Woman, Cold Case, and Defiance.
Dedication. Christy, this one's for you.
It's also in 51st Dates, a different version by 311.
Whenever I'm alone with you.
Adele, Death Cab for Cutie.
I'm alone with you. You make me feel like I am home again.
Corey Taylor, OAR, 5 Seconds of Summer, Imagine Dragons, and Tori Amos.
Whenever I'm alone with you.
Smith, of course, was not unaware of the irony surrounding Lovesong. Reaching number 2 on the Hot 100, it shined a spotlight on a band that had happily been hiding in the shadows for over a decade. All of a sudden, The Cure were popular. A thought so insidious it had troubled Smith into making the anti-pop record Disintegration in the first place. But as much as that realization, may have dismayed him, this number 2 song and number 12 album cemented The Cure's position as the premier alternative choice of the day. I mean, armies of teenage to 20-something outcasts and misfits rushed to the nearest record store to get their hands on this album. It was a glorious day. Turns out, that was a sizable portion of the record-buying public. Within 10 weeks of Disintegration's release, The Cure would be playing the album in front of 75,000 fans at LA's Dodger Stadium. The Cure, like it or not, they had arrived. And it would be even more obvious when they released Wish a few years later, with Friday I Am in Love. Like I said, I distinctly remember when Lovesong was at number 2 and Janet Jackson was at number 1, with Miss You Much. To make matters even worse, though, a week later, another one of my favorite bands, Tears for Fears, with their Beatlesque masterpiece, had to settle for number 2 as well, Sowing the Seeds of Love. You know what? Looking back on it, it was so great that both of these songs were being introduced to the masses. We don't have songs like these interrupting the mainstream charts anymore. We just don't. We were part of a really special time, a magical era, when the underground soldiers of bands like The Cure and Depeche Mode and Tears for Fears could ruffle some feathers.
I'm taking a ride with my best friend.
Bands that made us feel like we were whole again. And still now, when we hear them, they make us feel like we're home again. Thanks so much, Robert Smith.
I will always love you.
Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about The Cure and Lovesong. It's a masterpiece. What do you remember about this song and about Disintegration? Share your feelings about the songs, about The Cure at this time, about mainstream music. Let's have a great discussion. Make sure to subscribe below as well if you like this video. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.